The moving truck pulled up to the small house on Maple Street, just as the sun was setting. It was late August, and the air was thick with humidity. A 12-year-old girl stepped out of the old sedan that had followed the truck all the way from the other side of the country. Her name was Lily, and she had spent the last 4 days watching the world change outside her window. Flat farmlands turned into rolling hills, then into suburbs she didn't recognize. Everything felt foreign now. Her father got out of the driver's seat and stretched his back. He looked tired. The kind of tired that doesn't go away with sleep. He had taken a new job at a factory here because the one back home had closed down. There was no choice in the matter. They had to move, or they would lose everything. Lily understood this, even though no one had explained it to her directly. She had heard her parents talking late at night when they thought she was asleep. Her mother walked over and put a hand on Lily's shoulder. "It's going to be okay," she said softly. "I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but we'll make this work." Lily nodded, but she didn't say anything. She looked at the small house in front of her. It was older than their last home, with peeling paint and a front porch that sagged a little on one side. The yard was overgrown, and there was a rusty mailbox at the end of the driveway. It wasn't much, but it was theirs now. Inside, the house smelled like dust and old wood. The floors creaked with every step. Lily found her room at the end of a narrow hallway. It was small, barely big enough for a bed and a dresser. The window looked out onto the backyard, where a single oak tree stood tall and lonely. That night, Lily lay in her sleeping bag on the floor because her bed hadn't been set up yet. She stared at the ceiling and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of this new place. A dog barking somewhere in the distance. Cars passing on the main road. The hum of the refrigerator downstairs. She missed her old room, her old friends, her old life. Everything she had known was gone now. The next morning, her grandmother arrived. She had flown in from the city, where she lived alone in a tiny apartment. Grandma had been a pianist once. A long time ago in another country. She had played in concert halls and performed for audiences who gave her standing ovations. But that was before everything changed. Before she had to leave her homeland with nothing but the clothes on her back. Now she was 73 years old, with silver hair and hands that shook slightly from age. But when she saw Lily, her face lit up with a warm smile. "There's my girl," she said, pulling Lily into a tight hug. "I've missed you so much." Grandma had come to help the family settle in, but Lily knew there was another reason too. Her grandmother wanted to make sure Lily didn't give up on the piano. They had been practicing together since Lily was 4 years old. It had started as a game, just a little girl pressing random keys while her grandmother laughed. But over the years, it had become something more. Something serious. Something beautiful. "Have you been practicing?" Grandma asked that afternoon, as they sat on the front porch. Lily shook her head. "There wasn't time. With the move and everything." Her grandmother nodded slowly. "I understand. But you can't let too much time pass. The music lives inside you, but you have to keep feeding it. Otherwise, it will go quiet." Lily looked down at her hands. They were small but strong, with calluses on her fingertips from years of playing. She loved the piano. She really did. But right now, she couldn't think about music. She could only think about how much she missed her old life. A week later, school started. Lily's mother had enrolled her at Westbrook Middle School, a large brick building about a mile from their house. On the first day, Lily put on the nicest clothes she had, a simple blue dress that her mother had bought at a thrift store. She looked at herself in the mirror and tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. The school was bigger than her old one. The hallways were crowded with students who all seemed to know each other. They walked in groups, laughing and talking about their summers. Lily walked alone, clutching her backpack straps and keeping her head down. She found her locker and tried to open it, but the combination didn't work. She tried again and again, her face growing red with frustration. A group of girls walked past, and one of them glanced at Lily with a look that wasn't quite mean but wasn't friendly either. They didn't stop to help. Finally, a teacher passing by noticed her struggle and helped her get the locker open. "First day? Jitters?" the teacher asked kindly. Lily nodded. "Something like that." Her first few classes were a blur. She sat in the back of each room and tried to make herself invisible. The other students had already formed their groups and friendships. There didn't seem to be any room for someone new, especially someone who didn't have the right clothes or the right phone or the right anything. At lunch, Lily found a quiet corner in the cafeteria and ate her sandwich alone. She watched the other students and tried to figure out how everything worked here. There seemed to be unwritten rules that everyone knew except her. Where to sit, who to talk to, what to wear. She felt like she was trying to read a book in a language she didn't understand. That afternoon, she had her first music class. She had signed up for piano because it was the only thing that felt familiar. The classroom was in a separate building, a small annex that had been added to the school years ago. Inside, there were several pianos arranged in rows, along with music stands and shelves full of sheet music. The teacher was a woman named Mrs. Patterson. She was tall and thin, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore expensive-looking clothes and had a way of looking at people that made them feel small. When Lily walked in, Mrs. Patterson glanced at her briefly, then looked away as if she had seen nothing interesting. "Find a seat," she said without warmth. "Class is about to begin." Lily sat at a piano in the back corner. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys but didn't press them. The piano was old but well-maintained. She could tell it had been tuned recently. Mrs. Patterson began the class by talking about expectations. She made it very clear that this was not an easy class. She expected dedication, discipline, and talent. Those who didn't have all three would not last long. She had been teaching for 25 years and had produced some of the finest young pianists in the state. She was proud of that record and intended to keep it. As she spoke, Lily noticed the other students nodding along eagerly. Most of them looked like they came from wealthy families. They had nice clothes, expensive watches, and an air of confidence that Lily couldn't fake. They had probably been taking private lessons since they were toddlers. They probably had grand pianos in their living rooms. Mrs. Patterson's eyes swept over the class and landed on Lily for a moment. Something flickered in her expression. It wasn't quite disapproval, but it wasn't acceptance either. It was more like she had already made up her mind about who Lily was and what she could do. Lily felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to say something, to prove that she belonged here just as much as anyone else. But the words wouldn't come, so she just sat there, small and quiet, trying not to be noticed. After class, Lily walked home alone. The late afternoon sun was warm on her face, but she felt cold inside. She thought about what her grandmother had said about keeping the music alive. She thought about all the years of practice, all the hours spent at the old piano in their living room back home. She thought about how much she loved to play, how the music made her feel like she was flying. But here, in this new place, none of that seemed to matter. Here, she was just the poor girl with the second-hand clothes. The girl who didn't fit in. The girl who sat in the back and didn't say a word. When she got home, her grandmother was sitting on the porch, waiting for her. "How was it?" she asked. Lily sat down next to her and let out a long breath. "Hard," she said honestly. "Everyone already knows each other. And the music teacher, she looked at me like I didn't belong." Her grandmother was quiet for a moment. Then she reached over and took Lily's hand in hers. "Do you remember what I told you when you were little? About why I left my country?" Lily nodded. She had heard the story many times, but she never got tired of it. "I had nothing when I came here," her grandmother continued. "No money, no job, no friends. I didn't even speak the language very well. People looked at me the same way that teacher looked at you, like I was nothing, like I didn't matter." "Too," she squeezed Lily's hand. "But I had one thing they couldn't take away from me. The music. It was inside me, and no one could touch it. And that's what you have too. It doesn't matter what anyone thinks of you. When you sit down at that piano, you become something more than what they see. You become the music itself. Lily felt tears prick her eyes. She leaned her head on her grandmother's shoulder and let herself cry for the first time since they had moved. Her grandmother held her close and hummed softly, an old melody from the country she had left behind so long ago. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Lily crept downstairs to where they had set up the old upright piano in the corner of the living room. It wasn't much to look at. The wood was scratched and worn, and some of the keys were slightly yellowed with age. But it was the same piano her grandmother had taught her on, the same piano that had been passed down through their family for generations. She sat down on the bench and placed her fingers on the keys. For a moment, she just sat there in the darkness, feeling the smooth ivory beneath her fingertips. Then, she began to play. The music came out soft at first, hesitant. But as she continued, it grew stronger. She played one of Chopin's nocturnes, a piece her grandmother had taught her years ago. The notes floated through the quiet house, filling the empty spaces with something beautiful. Upstairs, her grandmother lay awake in bed, listening. A smile crossed her wrinkled face. The music was still alive, and as long as it stayed alive, everything else would work out. It had to. 3 weeks passed, and nothing got easier for Lily. Every morning, she woke up hoping that today would be different, and every night, she went to bed disappointed. School felt like walking through a maze where everyone else knew the way out except her. In the hallways, students moved around her like water flowing around a stone. They didn't push her or say mean things. It was worse than that. They simply acted like she wasn't there at all. She was invisible, a ghost walking among the living. She ate lunch alone every day at the same corner table. She had tried sitting with other students once, during the first week. She had spotted an empty seat at a table full of girls from her English class and asked if she could join them. They had exchanged quick glances, those silent looks that say everything without words, before one of them smiled politely and said the seat was taken. It wasn't. Lily had watched from across the cafeteria as the seat stayed empty the entire lunch period. After that, she stopped trying. Her classes were fine academically. She was smart and kept up with the work easily. But she never raised her hand, never volunteered answers, never drew attention to herself. She had learned that being noticed wasn't always a good thing. Better to stay quiet. Better to blend into the background. Music class was the hardest. She loved playing the piano more than anything, but Mrs. Patterson made it difficult to enjoy. The teacher had a way of making Lily feel small without ever saying anything directly mean. It was in the way she looked at her. Or, rather, the way she looked past her. It was in the way she called on other students to demonstrate techniques but never asked Lily. It was in the way she praised the expensive performances of kids who had been taking private lessons their whole lives. Mrs. Patterson clearly had her favorites. They were the students with natural talent, yes. But more importantly, they were the students whose parents donated money to the school's music program. They were the students who wore designer clothes and talked about their summer trips to Europe. They were the students who belonged. Lily did not belong. That much was clear. She still practiced at home every night. Her grandmother had extended her stay to help with the transition, and they spent hours together at the old piano. Grandma would sit beside her, pointing out small corrections, encouraging her to dig deeper into the emotion of each piece. Music is not just about hitting the right notes, her grandmother would say. Anyone can learn to hit the right notes with enough practice. But making the music come alive, making it breathe and feel, that is the real gift. That is what you have, my dear. Don't ever forget it. Lily tried to hold on to those words during the long school days. But it was hard. So very hard. One afternoon in early October, the air had turned crisp with the first hints of autumn. Lily was sitting in music class, In her usual spot at the piano in the back corner, the room was full of the soft sounds of students warming up, scales and simple melodies mixing together in a pleasant chaos. Mrs. Patterson stood at the front of the room, reviewing notes on her clipboard. She seemed distracted today, more irritable than usual. Something was bothering her, though Lily couldn't guess what. "All right, everyone, settle down," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice cutting through the noise. The room went quiet immediately. "I've been reviewing your progress over the past few weeks, and frankly, I'm disappointed. Some of you have been coasting, thinking you can get by on natural ability alone. That is not how this class works. That is not how music works." She began pacing slowly between the rows of pianos. Music requires dedication. It requires sacrifice. It requires showing up every single day and giving everything you have. If you're not willing to do that, then you don't belong in my class. Her eyes swept across the room as she spoke. When they landed on Lily, they paused for just a moment longer than necessary. Lily felt her stomach tighten. "I've noticed," Mrs. Patterson continued, still looking in Lily's direction, "that some of you have been unusually quiet, hiding in the back, doing the bare minimum. Perhaps you think that if you don't draw attention to yourself, no one will notice that you don't really have what it takes." A few students glanced back at Lily. She kept her eyes fixed on the piano keys in front of her, her face burning with embarrassment. "Well, I notice everything," Mrs. Patterson said. "And today, we're going to find out exactly where everyone stands." She walked back to the front of the room and set down her clipboard. "We're going to have impromptu performances. Each of you will come up here and play something. It can be anything you've been working on. This is your chance to show me what you're capable of." The other students shifted in their seats. Some looked nervous, others excited. The favorites, the ones Mrs. Patterson always praised, seemed confident. They had been preparing for moments like this their whole lives. Mrs. Patterson called on students one by one. They walked to the grand piano at the front of the room and played their pieces. Some were good, technically proficient, and polished. Others struggled, their nervousness showing in missed notes and hesitant timing. Mrs. Patterson offered brief comments after each performance. "Good dynamics. Watch your tempo there. Nice recovery from that mistake." Her feedback was fair but clinical, like a doctor delivering test results. Lily watched each performance and felt her anxiety grow. She knew her turn was coming. She could feel it in the way Mrs. Patterson kept glancing toward the back of the room. A strange look in her eyes. It wasn't just disinterest anymore. It was something else. Something that looked almost like anticipation. Finally, there were only a few students left who hadn't played. Mrs. Patterson looked down at her list, then looked up at Lily. "You," she said, pointing directly at her. "Come up here." The word hung in the air. The other students turned to look at Lily. Some of them seemed curious. Others wore small smirks, as if they were expecting something entertaining. Lily's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her hands had gone cold and slightly damp. She slowly stood up from her bench, her legs feeling unsteady beneath her. "Today, please," Mrs. Patterson said impatiently. "We don't have all day." Lily walked to the front of the room. The journey felt endless, each step taking her further from the safety of her corner and closer to the spotlight she had been trying to avoid. When she reached the grand piano, she stood beside it awkwardly, not sure what to do with her hands. "Sit down," Mrs. Patterson instructed. Then, to the class, she added, "Our quiet friend here has been with us for 3 weeks now and hasn't shown us anything. Let's see if there's actually a pianist hiding back there, or just someone who wanted an easy credit." A few students laughed quietly. Lily felt her cheeks burn even hotter. She sat down on the bench and placed her trembling fingers on the keys. "Well," Mrs. Patterson said, "what are you going to play for us?" Lily's mind went blank. All the pieces she had practiced, all the hours with her grandmother, Everything seemed to disappear. She couldn't remember any of it. The piano keys looked like a foreign alphabet she had never learned. "I don't have all day," Mrs. Patterson repeated. "If you can't even decide on a piece, perhaps you really don't belong in this class." The room was completely silent now. Everyone was watching, waiting. Lily could feel their eyes on her like physical weight. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to be anywhere but here. But then something happened. A memory surfaced from somewhere deep inside her. Her grandmother's voice, soft and warm, speaking to her when she was just a little girl, sitting at the piano for the first time. The music lives inside you. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. When you play, you become the music itself. Lily took a deep breath. She closed her eyes for a moment and let herself go to that quiet place inside her. The place where the music lived. She thought about her grandmother, about all the lessons and the love that had been poured into her over the years. She thought about everything her family had been through, all the struggles and sacrifices. And then she thought about the piece. The one her grandmother had been teaching her for the past year. The one she had never played for anyone outside her family. It was incredibly difficult, one of the hardest pieces in the classical repertoire. Her grandmother had chosen it specifically because she believed Lily was ready for it. Lily opened her eyes and looked at the piano keys. They didn't look foreign anymore. They looked like old friends, waiting to welcome her home. Mrs. Patterson was watching with crossed arms, her expression a mixture of impatience and smug satisfaction. She had clearly already decided how this was going to go. In her mind, Lily was about to embarrass herself in front of everyone, confirming what she had believed all along. Another untalented student, wasting her time. The other students waited with similar expectations. Some felt a little sorry for Lily, the quiet girl who was about to be humiliated. Others were just glad it wasn't them up there. No one expected what was about to happen. Lily placed her fingers on the keys in the opening position. She took one more breath, letting all the fear and anxiety flow out of her. And then, she began to play. The first notes rang out clear and strong, filling the room with their beauty. A few students sat up straighter, surprised by the quality of the sound. Mrs. Patterson's expression flickered. Just for a moment, before settling back into skepticism. But as Lily continued, the skepticism began to fade. The piece was Chopin's Ballade, No. 1-inch G minor. A work that even professional pianists approached with respect and caution. It was nearly 10 minutes long, filled with technical challenges and emotional depth that most students her age couldn't begin to understand, let alone perform. Lily understood it. She had lived it. Every note carried a piece of her story. The soft passages spoke of quiet moments with her grandmother, of love passed down through generations. The dramatic crescendos echoed the struggles her family had faced, the hardships they had overcome. The delicate runs were like prayers, like hopes for a better future. She played from memory, her eyes closed, her body swaying gently with the music. Her fingers moved across the keys with a precision and grace that seemed impossible for someone so young. But more than that, there was something else in her playing. Something that couldn't be taught. A soul. The room had gone absolutely still. No one moved. No one breathed. The only sound was the piano, singing its beautiful, heartbreaking song. Mrs. Patterson's arms had fallen to her sides. Her face had gone pale. She stared at Lily, as if seeing her for the first time. All her assumptions, all her judgments, crumbled away with each passing measure. The piece built toward its climax, the notes coming faster and more intensely. Lily's fingers flew across the keys, never missing a beat, never losing control. She was lost in the music now, transported to a place beyond the classroom, beyond the staring students, beyond everything that had made her feel small and invisible. And then, the final notes. Powerful chords that rang out like thunder, followed by the gentle descent to the ending. Soft, tender, full of longing. Lily held the last note for a moment, letting it fade naturally into silence. Then she lifted her hands from the keys and sat perfectly still. The silence that followed was unlike anything that room had ever experienced. It was the kind of silence that comes after something extraordinary, when people need a moment to understand what they've just witnessed. No one knew what to say. No one knew what to do. The quiet girl from the back of the room had just given a performance that most of them would remember for the rest of their lives. And Mrs. Patterson, the teacher who had tried to shame her, stood frozen in place. Her world suddenly turned upside down. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Lily sat at the grand piano with her hands in her lap, suddenly very aware of where she was. The music had carried her away to another place. But now she was back in the classroom, surrounded by people who had just watched her bare her soul without meaning to. She didn't look up. She couldn't. Instead, she stared at the piano keys, waiting for whatever would come next. Part of her expected Mrs. Patterson to find some flaw, some mistake to criticize. That's what the teacher did. That's who she was. But Mrs. Patterson didn't say anything. She stood frozen at the front of the room, her mouth slightly open, her carefully composed expression completely gone. For the first time since Lily had known her, the woman looked unsure of herself. Then, from somewhere in the middle of the room, a single clap broke the silence. It was a boy Lily didn't know. A tall kid with messy hair who sat near the window. He clapped again, slowly at first, then faster. And then the girl next to him joined in. And then another student. And another. Within seconds, the entire classroom had erupted in applause. It wasn't polite clapping, the kind students give because they're supposed to. This was something else. This was genuine, almost involuntary, the kind of response that comes when people witness something that moves them. Some students were even standing up, craning their necks to get a better look at Lily, as if they were seeing her for the first time. Because, in a way, they were. Lily felt her face flush, but this time it wasn't from embarrassment. It was something else. Something she couldn't quite name. She risked a glance up at the room and saw faces full of wonder. People who had ignored her for weeks were now looking at her with respect, even awe. The applause went on and on. Lily didn't know what to do with it. She had never performed for an audience before. Not really. Back home, it was always just her and her grandmother in the living room. Sometimes her parents would listen from the kitchen. But this was different. This was being seen. Finally, the clapping began to die down. Students settled back into their seats, still buzzing with energy. They whispered to each other, glancing at Lily, and then at Mrs. Patterson, waiting to see what would happen next. Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat. She seemed to be struggling to find words, which was strange because she always had something to say. She was known for her quick critiques and sharp observations. But now she looked lost. She started, then stopped. She tried again. The piece you chose was. She couldn't finish the sentence. Lily slowly stood up from the piano bench. Her legs felt shaky, like she had just run a marathon. She wanted to go back to her seat in the corner, to disappear again. Being the center of attention felt uncomfortable, like wearing clothes that didn't fit. "You can sit down," Mrs. Patterson finally managed to say. Her voice sounded different. Lily walked back to her corner piano. As she passed the other students, she could feel their eyes following her. A few of them smiled at her. Real smiles, not the polite empty ones she was used to. One girl reached out and touched her arm lightly as she passed, a small gesture of acknowledgement. When Lily sat down, she realized her hands were trembling. Not from nerves this time, but from the after effects of the performance. She had put everything into those 9 minutes. Every emotion, every memory, every piece of herself. Now she felt emptied out, like a glass that had been poured completely dry. Mrs. Patterson looked down at her clipboard. then back up at the class. She seemed to be deciding something. Finally, she said, "Class is dismissed early today. We'll continue with the remaining performances tomorrow." The students gathered their things and began filing out of the room. There was more chatter than usual. Excited whispers about what they had just witnessed. Lily heard her name mentioned several times, but couldn't make out what was being said. She took her time putting away her things, hoping to be the last one out. She didn't want to face questions or attention. She just wanted to go home and sit with her grandmother and process what had happened. But as she was about to leave, Mrs. Patterson's voice stopped her. "Wait. I need to speak with you." Lily's stomach dropped. Here it comes, she thought. The criticism. The accusation. Maybe Mrs. Patterson would say she had cheated somehow. That there was no way she could really play like that. Maybe she would accuse her of showing off. She turned around slowly. The classroom was empty now, except for the two of them. Mrs. Patterson was sitting on the edge of her desk, arms crossed, studying Lily with an expression that was hard to read. "Close the door," the teacher said. Lily did as she was told, her heart pounding again. She stood near the door, keeping as much distance between them as possible. "Come here," Mrs. Patterson said. "I'm not going to bite." Lily walked closer, stopping a few feet from the teacher's desk. She kept her eyes down, focused on a scuff mark on the floor. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Lily could hear the clock on the wall ticking, each second stretching out painfully. Finally, Mrs. Patterson spoke. "Where did you learn to play like that?" The question surprised Lily. She had expected an accusation, not genuine curiosity. She looked up and saw something unexpected in the teacher's eyes. It wasn't anger or suspicion. It was something closer to wonder. "My grandmother taught me," Lily said quietly. "She's been teaching me since I was 4. "Your grandmother," Mrs. Patterson repeated. Lily hesitated. She never talked about her grandmother's past. It felt too private, too precious to share with strangers. But something about the moment made her want to explain, to help this woman understand. "She was a concert pianist," Lily said. "A long time ago. In another country. She played in big halls with orchestras. She was famous there." Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose. "What country?" Lily told her. She explained how her grandmother had been one of the best pianists of her generation, how she had won competitions and performed for audiences of thousands. But then political troubles had come to her country. Artists were persecuted. Musicians were silenced. Her grandmother had been forced to flee with nothing but the clothes on her back. "She came here and started over," Lily continued. "She couldn't perform anymore. She didn't have connections or money or anything. She worked cleaning houses for years, but she never stopped playing. And when I was born, she started teaching me everything she knew." Mrs. Patterson was silent throughout this explanation. Her expression had changed several times, shifting from surprise to understanding to something that might have been shame. "I've never heard of her," the teacher admitted. "But that piece you played, I've heard professional pianists perform it. You were better than most of them." Lily didn't know what to say to that. She had never compared herself to professionals. She just played because she loved it, because it connected her to her grandmother and to something larger than herself. "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" Mrs. Patterson asked. "When you signed up for the class, when I asked about your experience." "You didn't ask," Lily said, the words coming out before she could stop them. There was no anger in her voice, just simple truth. "You looked at me on the first day and decided what I was. You never asked about my grandmother, or my training, or anything." The words hung in the air between them. Mrs. Patterson opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. She looked away, toward the window, as if she couldn't meet Lily's eyes. "You're right," she said finally. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "I looked at you, and I made assumptions. I saw your clothes, your quietness, The fact that you were new and didn't seem to know anyone. I decided you were just another student who didn't really care about music, someone who would coast through my class and drag down the level. She turned back to face Lily. I was wrong. I was very, very wrong. Lily wasn't sure how to respond to that. She had never heard a teacher admit to being wrong before, especially not Mrs. Patterson. The woman had a reputation for never backing down, never apologizing, never admitting any fault. I've been teaching for 25 years, Mrs. Patterson continued. I've seen hundreds of students come through this room. Most of them forget about music the moment they graduate. A few go on to study it further. But every once in a while, maybe once or twice in a career, you encounter someone truly special. Someone with a gift that can't be taught. She looked at Lily directly. You are one of those people. I knew it the moment you started playing today. You have something rare and precious, something that most musicians spend their entire lives trying to find. Lily felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back, not wanting to cry in front of the teacher. But the words meant more than she could express. For weeks, she had felt invisible and worthless in this class. Now she was being told she had something special. Your grandmother must be an extraordinary teacher, Mrs. Patterson said. She is, Lily agreed. She's the best person I know. Mrs. Patterson nodded slowly. She seemed to be wrestling with something internal, some decision or realization that was difficult to face. I owe you an apology, she said. Not just for today, but for the past 3 weeks. I treated you unfairly. I let my prejudices blind me to who you really are. That's not what a teacher is supposed to do. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Lily could tell it wasn't easy for Mrs. Patterson to say them. This was a proud woman, someone who had built her reputation on being right and being excellent. Admitting she had been wrong must have felt like swallowing glass. I accept your apology, Lily said quietly. Mrs. Patterson let out a breath she seemed to have been holding. They stood there for a moment in silence. The tension that had filled the room had dissolved into something else, something closer to understanding. Two people who had started as adversaries were now seeing each other clearly for the first time. I'd like to hear more about your grandmother sometime, Mrs. Patterson said. If you're willing to share. Her story sounds remarkable. Lily nodded. Maybe. I'd have to ask her first. She doesn't talk about the past very much. It hurts her to remember. I understand, Mrs. Patterson said. Some wounds never fully heal. Well, she stood up from the desk and smoothed her skirt, composing herself back into the professional teacher she showed the world. But something had shifted. The hardness in her eyes had softened. And when she looked at Lily now, there was respect there. You should go, she said. Your family will be wondering where you are. Lily gathered her backpack and headed for the door. But before she opened it, she turned back one more time. Mrs. Patterson? Yes? Thank you for listening. And for saying what you said. It means a lot. The teacher nodded once, a small acknowledgement. Play well. Lily, you have a gift. Don't let anyone, including me, ever, make you forget that. Lily walked out of the classroom and into the empty hallway. The afternoon sun was slanting through the windows, casting long golden rectangles on the floor. She felt different somehow. Lighter. The weight she had been carrying for weeks seemed to have lifted just a little. She couldn't wait to tell her grandmother what had happened. Lily practically ran the whole way home. Her feet barely touched the sidewalk as she hurried through the autumn streets, past the yellowing trees and the houses with their neat lawns. Everything looked different somehow, brighter and more alive. The world hadn't changed, but the way she saw it had. When she burst through the front door, her grandmother was sitting in the living room with a cup of tea, reading one of her old novels. She looked up, startled by the sudden entrance. What happened? Her grandmother asked, concern crossing her face. Are you all right? Lily was out of breath, her cheeks flushed from running. She dropped her backpack by the door and rushed to sit beside her grandmother on the worn couch. Something happened today, she said. Something amazing. And then she told her everything. The impromptu performances. Mrs. Patterson calling her to the front. The fear and the blankness that had almost swallowed her. And then the music, coming from somewhere deep inside, carrying her through the ballade. The silence afterward. The applause. The conversation with Mrs. Patterson. Her grandmother listened without interrupting. Her weathered hands held the teacup, but she didn't drink. Her eyes stayed fixed on Lily's face, absorbing every word, every emotion. When Lily finished, there was a long pause. Then her grandmother set down the teacup and took Lily's hands in hers. "I knew this day would come," she said softly. "I've been waiting for it for years." "What do you mean?" Lily asked. Her grandmother smiled, that special smile she had when she was about to share something important. "When I started teaching you, you were so small, your fingers could barely reach the keys. But I saw something in you right away. A spark. The same spark I had when I was young." She squeezed Lily's hands gently. "I didn't teach you just so you could play notes. I taught you so that one day, you could do exactly what you did today. So you could walk into a room where no one believed in you, and show them the truth of who you are." Tears began to stream down Lily's face. She didn't try to stop them this time. "I was so scared, Grandma. I almost couldn't do it." "But you did," her grandmother said firmly. "That's what matters. Fear is always there, waiting at the door. The question is whether you let it in or whether you find something stronger to stand against it. You found the music, and the music was stronger." Lily leaned into her grandmother's embrace, feeling the familiar warmth and the faint scent of lavender that always seemed to surround her. For a moment, she was a little girl again, safe and protected from the world. "Tell me about when you used to perform," Lily said. "Please. I want to hear it again." Her grandmother hesitated. She rarely spoke about her past, about the life she had left behind. The memories were wrapped in thorns, beautiful, but painful to touch. But tonight felt different. Tonight, something had opened between them. A door that had been waiting to be unlocked. "All right," her grandmother said. She settled back into the couch and closed her eyes for a moment, reaching across the decades to retrieve memories that had grown dusty with time. "I gave my first public performance when I was 13 years old," she began. "The same age you are now. It was in a small concert hall in our city, not very fancy. But to me, it seemed like the grandest place in the world. The stage lights were so bright, I could barely see the audience. I remember my hands were shaking so badly I thought I would make mistakes." "Did you?" Lily asked. Her grandmother smiled. "A few. Small ones. But I kept playing, just like you did today. And when I finished, there was this moment of silence. I thought I had done terribly. I was ready to run off the stage in shame. But then, the applause started, and it didn't stop for a very long time." She opened her eyes and looked at Lily. "That was when I knew. Music wasn't just something I did. It was who I was. It was my voice, my way of speaking to the world." "What happened after that?" Lily asked. She had heard pieces of her grandmother's story before, but never the whole thing. Never, in such detail. "I studied at the best conservatory in the country. I practiced 10 hours a day, sometimes more. My teachers said I had potential to be one of the greats. I won competitions, played with orchestras, performed for audiences of thousands." Her grandmother's voice grew quieter. "And then, everything changed. The government decided that artists were dangerous, that music and literature and theater were threats to their power. They started arresting people, sending them away to places from which they never returned." Lily held her breath. This was the part of the story that hurt the most. "I was warned that my name was on a list," her grandmother continued. "I had to leave immediately. There was no time to gather belongings, no time to say proper goodbyes. I took only what I could carry in a small bag and fled in the middle of the night. She paused, her eyes distant. I left everything behind. My piano, my sheet music, my awards and photographs, my parents, who were too old to make the journey. I never saw them again. The weight of those words hung in the air. Lily couldn't imagine losing everything like that, being forced to start over with nothing but memories of a life that no longer existed. When I arrived here, I was nobody, her grandmother said. No one knew who I had been, what I had achieved. I didn't speak the language well. I had no money, no connections. I took work, cleaning houses, just to survive. But you kept playing, Lily said. Yes, I found a broken piano in a second-hand shop. So, out of tune, it made a terrible noise. But I bought it anyway, with money I had saved for months. I fixed it up slowly, piece by piece, and every night, after cleaning houses all day until my back ached, I would sit at that piano and play. Her grandmother looked at Lily with fierce intensity. That's the piano in our living room, the same one I taught you on. It kept me alive when everything else was gone. Lily thought about all the hours she had spent at that old piano, never really understanding its history. Now it seemed different, sacred almost. A survivor, just like her grandmother. I never performed publicly again, her grandmother said. I was too proud at first, too hurt to play for people who didn't know what I had lost. And then time passed, and it seemed too late. I became just another old woman, invisible to the world. She reached up and touched Lily's face gently. But when you were born, something changed. I looked at you and I saw a second chance. Not for me, but for the music. A way for it to live on, to find new audiences, to touch new hearts. Is that why you taught me? Lily asked. That's part of it. But mostly I taught you because you wanted to learn. Even as a tiny child, you were drawn to the piano. You would crawl up to it and bang on the keys with such joy. I knew then that the spark had passed to you. Her grandmother smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. What you did today, standing up in front of that room and playing when everyone expected you to fail, that took courage. Courage I'm not sure I would have had at your age. You had courage, Lily protested. You left everything behind, started a new life. That was survival, her grandmother said. What you did was choice. You chose to show them who you are. You chose to let the music speak. That's different, and in some ways harder. They sat together in the dimming light as evening settled over the small house. Lily's mother came home from work and started making dinner, filling the house with the smell of cooking. Her father arrived shortly after, tired but smiling when he heard about Lily's day. My daughter, the pianist, he said proudly, wrapping her in a hug. That night, after dinner, Lily sat down at the old piano. Her grandmother sat beside her, just as she had for so many years. But this time, instead of teaching, she just listened. Lily played Chopin again, the same ballade. But now, it sounded different. There was something new in it, a depth that hadn't been there before. The experience of the afternoon had added another layer to her understanding, another color to her palette. When she finished, her grandmother nodded slowly. Better, she said simply. Every time you share the music with others, it grows. It becomes more itself. Grandma, Lily said, Mrs. Patterson asked about you. She wanted to know your story. Her grandmother was quiet for a moment. What did you tell her? A little. Not everything. I said I would have to ask you first. That was wise. Her grandmother stared at the piano keys, lost in thought. I've kept my story hidden for so many years. It felt safer that way, like protecting a wound from the air. But maybe it's time to stop hiding. She looked at Lily with a mix of sadness and hope. Maybe your generation can carry the story forward. Keep it alive when I'm gone, so that people remember what was lost and what survived. Lily didn't like thinking about her grandmother being gone someday. She pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the present moment, on the warmth of the room and the comfort of family around her. "I'll tell your story," she said, "whenever you're ready. And when I play, I'll carry it with me. Every note will have a piece of you in it." Her grandmother blinked back tears. That's all I could ever ask for. They sat together at the piano late into the evening, two generations connected by music and love, and a history that refused to be silenced. Outside, the autumn night grew cold and dark. But inside the small house on Maple Street, something bright and warm was growing. Lily didn't know what the future would hold. She didn't know if she would become a famous pianist or just someone who played for the love of it. She didn't know if school would get easier or if she would ever truly fit in. But she knew one thing for certain. She knew who she was now, and no one could ever take that away. The music had given her that gift, and she intended to spend the rest of her life passing it on.